Welcome to CTRM Radio, home of the official podcast of Commodity Technology Advisory and your source for information on all matters related to CTRM.
Hello and Happy New Year 2024. Welcome to another episode of CTRM Radio, an ad hoc podcast from Commodity Technology Advisory, hosted on CTRMcenter.com, your place for everything CTRM and related. My name is Gary Vasey, and I'm introducing the first podcast of 2024. CTRM Radio is now video and audio. That's the first announcement. And in today's podcast, we'll be talking to several guests, asking them what trends they see in commodities and technology that will impact CTRM software in 2024. So let's get started. So Steve, thanks for joining us. I just was wanting to sort of pick your brain on what kind of trends you're seeing within commodities and CTRM that you think will have impact in 2024.
Okay, and I have to hold my hand up and say you're picking collective brains, because the team at Core went through this not long ago in terms of our own planning for next year and beyond. So I'm grateful to have all these experts with me, which I'm not. But anyway, let me do the best I can. Anyway, we did kind of highlight a number of trends, and I picked the kind of top four for this discussion.
Yeah.
And I guess the first one is continued disruption to supply chains. So for all sorts of reasons, including geopolitical events and disruption to the supply chain, I don't have to tell you that that's always a costly thing for whoever's trading and moving stuff around.
Yeah.
So if you take the Red Sea, for example, any rerouting due to the latest conflict in the Middle East, that adds 6,000 kilometers to the journey.
Yeah.
And that's 9 or 10 days trip. That causes pain in all sorts of ways, not just monetarily. And if you remember, we've actually got some data from the pandemic times, and that loaded costs for long haul stuff by 25% plus. So this is likely to cause a similar impact. So we see that going on, and of course the Russian-Ukraine conflict isn't helping, and particularly given the amount of wheat and other stuff that they supply to the world. That's going to give us, I think, some continued grief.
Yeah.
And I think from turning that kind of world event back into the supply industry for CTRM, I think what we see amongst clients is a lot more focus on integrating supply chain solutions with classic commodity trading and risk management solutions. And that's to give them a much better holistic view of what's going on in warehousing, shipping, and everything else, so that they can, in some way, combat that disruption. And again, it's not something the industry's not used to, but I think if you take COVID and then the Russia-Ukraine war and then Israel and Gaza, all those things are compounding now, and a lot would argue we haven't recovered from the pandemic yet. Never mind being exacerbated by the other events.
Yeah.
So we definitely see amongst our clients that there's this move to integrate not just supply chain systems, but more other systems around it that gives them a better handle on it. The second thing we see, which again from a trend point of view is not new, but maybe it's a little bit more intense these days, is market volatility and price risk. And a lot of traders are having to make trading decisions that really need to be made in real time. You'll see, yourself from what we see in vendors, both old and new. The old ones are adding real-time kind of capabilities to their older products, and the new ones certainly have that in spades as they come along. So I definitely think that's another reaction in the kind of looking at or trying to get a real-time position. You've heard me say before that historically traders used to do trading using the rear view mirror. They could only see into yesterday because they only did end-of-day stuff. These days, everybody needs to look out the front of the cockpit because things are changing so quickly. And if you can't look out the front of the cockpit in real time, you can bet your life your competitors are doing it. So we see that trend increasingly, and it comes up a lot in our discussions with clients in terms of what they're trying to do with their systems and the demands they put on us and other vendors, I might ask.
Yeah.
The third area we see, and it might be a symptom of everything I've just said, is that merchants and traders are now overwhelmed with the volume of data they've got to handle. And that's greatly impacting their ability to make decisions quickly. As the data volume increases and the number of data points increases, and you've got to bring more into the equation to make a good, sensible decision, that's really impacting the efficiency, if you will, of those operations. And that's where, again, turning back to technology, that's where I think artificial intelligence comes in, machine learning comes in, and there's definitely a new trend within the vendor side of the industry to bring amazing analytic tools to play. And there's, as you know, there's a whole bunch of companies now that do that extremely well, both old and new. So I think AI's got a big part to play here, helping traders make decisions, because the one thing AI can do is deal with masses of data. This thing we all have up here is a pretty clever piece of kit, but when it comes to massive amounts of data, we do struggle, which I think is where AI might play a role. And again, we're seeing demands from our customers saying, what are you doing on the AI front? And I think, as we've explained to you before, we've got an important project, a kind of renovation project that called Project Evolution, that's trying to bring a lot of new tech to play within our solutions, not just for what we have now, but for what we're going to acquire in the future. And so artificial intelligence and those things are playing a big part in what we do. And again, I'm seeing that from other members of the vendor community. And the other big trend that we see, the fourth trend, is obviously the one that I would guess every contributor to this podcast is going to say, and that's the energy transition. The move to renewables causes extra pressure on what a lot of those systems can do and can support. But the other thing it's doing is, it's okay, changing to renewable energy, solar and so on, but it's the demand that puts on a lot of the minerals around the world, things like cobalt and lithium and nickel, and copper and so on. And I know one estimate is that that's supposed to, grow by 6 or 7 times by 2030. In fact, I think it was the IEA that predicted that, because of that shift towards renewable energy. Now, I know that you personally have a particular take on the renewable energy world and what we're doing, and I think you also know I agree with it. So for those listening, beware of what you hear about climate change and cycles of the planet heating and all those things. What I encourage you to do is take a geological timeline, not something like a watch or a couple of years or even 100 years. Anyway, that's me off the platform now, off the soapbox. But whether it's true or it's not true, it's causing changes in how people use the systems and the type of coverage that they need.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are the things that brings? And I think, if you look at our company, we've been around for a good while, as of many others. And again, part of the reason we're doing Project Evolution is to try and capture the ability to be more agile than we have historically. But as you know, that long tail of new players in the market, they're built with agility in mind. And that's going to become important as they now have to adapt those platforms to embrace new commodities that maybe people cared less about in the past and have to care about more now, or maybe it's going into their portfolio. So they would be the 4 main trends that we're seeing. We do see a number of others, but they're outside the scope of what do we think are the 4 main ones.
Yeah, I think those are really excellent trends, and I think the upside to a couple of them at least is that traders obviously like volatility, and when you've got raw materials in short supply with a long lead time, like some of the metals, the battery metals and the rare earths, then that also leads to volatility and rising prices. So good opportunities for traders. Absolutely.
And a lot of people say to me, what happens to vendors when the price of oil and other commodities is low? It's nothing to do with that, as long as it's volatile.
Yeah, as long as it's volatile.
Volatility's it's definitely good for vendors, and it's good for good trading companies. and those that are not quite as well equipped tend to suffer a little bit more.
I think it's going to be interesting times ahead with lots of challenges. And I think one of the words that you use that I would pick up on is agility, the need for agility, the need to be able to adapt rapidly to changing situations. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Jan, what are you seeing in terms of trends that you think are important and relevant for 2024 when it comes to CTRM and commodity management software?
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, the beginning of the year, right? Early January.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year as well. Well, actually, the trend started already, of course, late last year. But I see clearly a trend over the entire space, and as related to CTRM and both on the commodity trade itself, but something what I call it data service fortification. What you see is a high trend of need for full automation of the trade cycle, so the registration. And because of all the combos of other trends, technology trends, we're talking about web services, AI, fast computing, fast speed internet on itself, you see that the world is trying to automate the entire process. So we get less depending almost on people, even in the complex trade of commodities, because it's one of the world's complex things to do, so to say.
Yeah.
And so you say, well, I'm Dutch, so we have a Dutch expression like mushrooms popping out of the ground, all kind of web services popping up with additional data. And that goes from real-time ETAs from ships, goes to freight rate quotes, it goes from automatic prices, trends, all the way up to the entire scale of our business. And what we see is a pull into the information world of CTRM, because CTRM traditional pure registration, but it's getting really fortified with that data,
right,
allowing a full automation skill. Some people call it hyper automation. So you actually let the machine almost do the process, but you're still in between. And that is being fortified by, well, let's say the green regulations start to bite at this moment. So there is a ton of compliance requests. Think about the deforestation, for example, rules in the cocoa and the coffee industry, and many more, which simply creates that need for automation. Otherwise, it's just impossible, especially for low workforce. That's the biggest trend at this moment.
Because you've got the EU import requirements have kicked in 1/1/24 as well, right?
Yeah, March 2024. I think I just had the date here, indeed. But yeah, that's the green. Yeah, some green supply, and there's still an iron and aluminium, what they call for the carbon, CBAM. Yeah, that kicks in already on the end of this month. But by the end of this year, let's say the deforestation rules kicking. So
right,
more and more of these compliance rules are kicking in, and then we don't even talk about constantly changing sanctions, all these kind of things where you have to deal with. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And it might be feasible for a larger commodity trader who has a complete back office, but we see those back offices reduced. We see with smaller traders to just be compliant is
right,
a challenge without automation.
So what you're saying then is more automation, more connectivity to different web services that are appearing all over the place, and more use of other technologies to improve workflow and everything else. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's of course caused by, it is also possible by the technology trends we discussed already way in the past, right? Cloud, artificial intelligence, a little bit of blockchain, but it's all these parts separate, which allows that hyper automation trend. Yeah.
So exciting times in 2024 and beyond.
Yes, but also a challenge. It's not only a technology challenge. It's also a process challenge. We have to start thinking different in the commodity trade. The knowledge, we had recently not so long ago a discussion that knowledge is disappearing out of this industry. So almost organizations have to trust the knowledge almost in a system compared to humans. I mean, not black and white, of course, but you see that moving along the whole chain. Absolutely.
And I guess the point I missed in what you'd said was adaptability. the ability to adapt to suddenly to new regulations and new requirements.
Yes, yeah, adaptability and do that fast. We are out of the eras are over that a rule was announced, a whole project team was staffed up, and let's say we do this. No, it needs to be instant, out of the box technology plugins to be able to allow that. And that in the CTRM world is by nature a challenge, because if you look at the systems board, sure, if you have large ERP systems or manufacturing, but those guys will prepare for that. But CTRM remains still kind of a niche industry where you have to make sure that those bolt-on are there. I just forgot the whole invoicing EU. It's like a shooting of compliance and projects to our clients to comply to and to use.
Yeah,
Indeed. That will be 2024. Making sure.
So challenging, but I think exciting as an analyst. And thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with us.
You're welcome.
Asbjørn, thank you for joining us today. I'd like to ask you what you're seeing in terms of trends in commodities and technologies that you feel will have a significant impact on CTRM software in 2024.
Sure, thanks, Gary. There's a bunch of things, right, going on, right? I think there's one thing that's kind of continuing from the previous years. That's kind of the cloud-first strategy, where more and more things is moving to cloud, and everything is moving away from on-premise, right? And building in software and delivering software that is natively to the cloud and utilizing the cloud tooling is becoming more and more prevalent, right? What we see at the moment, though, is we see a lot of security concerns, of course, with cloud, but a lot of new technology and VNets and all sorts of things being put in to create like semi-private or privately protected cloud within the cloud, right? So that's definitely a new thing that we haven't spent so much time in the previous years, but currently this year's and also late last year became much more prevalent, where people are very concerned about security in cloud and therefore adding additional features in cloud, right? So that's a whole separate bucket to me, right? So that's one thing. That then facilitates another change, and that's this continued change is this monolith service, right? From a single platform that should do everything to a whole bunch of services that you use for different things, right? Going to structures where it's more like a microservice architecture, in a way where different pieces of software put together to create the solution for the customer, right? People basically thinking that, well, actually, I can't go somewhere and buy one piece of software that will do everything I need, because no real software does that. I need a combination of things. So that is definitely a change that we see, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because depending on what you trade, it is always different. There's always local differences that you need specific things for each country and so on and so forth, and therefore you end up with these sort of mixed max of.
So looking for a sort of an ecosystem as opposed to a monolithic approach.
Absolutely, absolutely right, and that's continuing. Also, each clearing broker has a different set of APIs you need to work with and so on and so forth, right? So there's always these different services you start implementing and putting together to an ecosystem of a solution, right? Then there is the performance thing, of course, is always critical, right? So performance is king, right? Again, scalability and higher trade count, right? Try to trace back to the wind parks and things, so you can do a P&L per turbine almost, right? It's basically getting bigger and bigger, and that means many more transactions to trace all that stuff, right? So that's something we see a lot, and it goes into the cost per trade thing as well. It continues to grow up because of algo trading. So that's something that's continually being important. And then the whole virtual power plant battery sector seems to be growing heavily again, right? So many years ago, VPPs were very popular, and they kind of disappeared a little bit. And now, especially with batteries, that becomes a big trend, I think, especially in the power side of things, where you see that lots of people are installing batteries, investing in batteries of various sizes, and then trying to build products based on those batteries that they can then sell as virtual power plants to other people, right? And that's definitely a trend that I see across Europe at the moment, becoming quite significant, at least.
Great. And anything on the sort of broad scale commodities geopolitical front that?
Well, there's the whole crisis in Ukraine, of course, right? That continues to make fun, right? Or create fun, at least. Of course, I mean that in inverted commas, right? The whole market east, which suddenly is, short gas, right, and even short oil, right, for many countries, right, and trying to move into new ways of producing oil locally instead, right? So suddenly, at least what I'm seeing is suddenly you see fracking coming into Europe again, especially around Ukraine and those sort of areas, right, where you see previously Europe didn't want any fracking, but now if you don't have any Russian oil or gas, suddenly it becomes something that people are looking at again, right? Like, what do we do now, right?
Well, there's a lot of misconceptions around fracking anyway that I'm constantly trying to put right as a geologist and an ex-oil industry petroleum geologist. I keep telling people I was fracking wells in 1984 in Lincolnshire, and they look at me in horror, like, what's so bad about fracking the reservoir? It's, you know, if it's managed properly, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, but we certainly see it, right? A long time it was not something you
Yeah.
speak about Europe, right? Now you see Ukraine
Yeah.
doing that, right? And with US technology, of course, because what else are you going to do, right? All of your supply came from Russia, right? You are totally depending on Russia in that sense.
Are you seeing the sort of Russia-Ukraine thing as a vendor? Is that leading to more demand or less demand, or a change in demand at all?
Well, as a vendor, right, volatility is good, right? Essentially, right? If there's no volatility, there's no trading, and therefore nobody needs to do anything, right? Yeah. So while it sounds bad to say that the war is good for vendors, it kind of is, because it creates, at least it creates volatility, right?
Yeah.
And uncertainty creates volatility is leading to need for systems, right? So not saying it's a good war at all, but I'm saying that that's what happens from that, right? Yeah. So as a vendor, that also, that's one thing. The other thing is that this creates new business opportunities, right? Whereas before you had, a flow of gas coming from Russia through Ukraine to the west, right? Now you suddenly see Ukrainian gas storage being used to supply Western Europe instead, right? So during the summer you suddenly flow to Ukraine, then you flow back in the winter and stuff, right? So you see change patterns because of the war, right? That is definitely
and the same
change as well.
The same thing's happening in a broader global context with the Middle East situation as well, because of the threat to oil cargoes, passing through the waters in that area. They're having to go out of their way and add many more days of transportation to reach the destination. So
exactly,
absolutely, volatility is key, so they say.
Yeah, exactly. And there's lots of it at the moment, at least, right? If it's not one place, it's somewhere else, and that all compounds to a situation where keeping track of your logistics chain, figuring out what's your ship, what's the risk, the political risk to your cargoes, is suddenly a thing again, right? Which for many years that was not really, that was pretty safe to go through, and suddenly it's not, right? That again creates higher freight rates. It creates more consumption of fuel as well for the ships, right? Yeah. And then delayed cargoes, basically.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your input, and
you're welcome.
See you again soon. So after listening to our three guests, I decided I would have a quick conversation with my colleague here at Comtech Advisory, Irina Wright-Gruber, and see what she was thinking and where we both consider everything to be going in terms of 2024 trends in CTRM. So Irina, we've obviously spoken to a number of the vendors in the CTRM space, and they've given us their views on trends in commodities and technologies that might impact CTRM software in 2024. And they came up with a lot of good stuff: geopolitical disruption, all those kind of things, technology trends like AI and cloud and software as a service. I wondered, though, if perhaps you had thoughts to offer as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the part of the industry mostly impacted by the recent developments, especially such as transition to net zero, is power industry and everything which is related to power trading. I would really start with the data management. So if you look at the data management before, it was just, economic data, FX change rates, of course, trading data, prices, volatilities, and so on. But now it's consumption data, production data, weather data, also satellite data. So with smart metering, you have a lot of instruments to derive analytics from customer data, customer consumption. And that gives a big push to development of software tools like flexible platforms where you can put your AI applications, where there are some tools to build forecasts, to build analytics, but also the tools which help security and transparency of that data. So there are a lot of privacy laws which does not allow sharing of private data, and of course everything related to smart metering data, customer data is included. And so there are a lot of attempts to develop algorithms not only to neutralize the data, but also to create synthetic data with the same statistical properties and so on. So this is also becomes quite a good focus of the industry. And based on that, also development in the trading and trading application follow similar paths. So it's not just cloud and scalability of the cloud, it's also a platform-like applications where you can add your own application on the top, where you can share different functionality on the same platform. So it's much more flexible, agile tool, which goes in direction of ecosystem rather than monolithic ETRM, CTRM system. That's what I think we're going to. And maybe last but not least is a trend to trading of flexibilities, developing on virtual power plants where you have aggregated resources combined in one virtual power plants, which can take part in the market in some sense. Depending on jurisdictions, you have either ancillary service market or you have just relationship with utilities, say via PPA or something similar. Or in some markets, you can even take part directly in the wholesale trading. So this new market participants are trading flexibility becomes very important. And here you have a push of analytical tools like AI, optimization of batteries, optimization of virtual power plants, this kind of applications. And also you need tradings in portfolio management system for those small aggregators, for the smaller market participants, which are growing in the number. And I think that this kind of market participants will grow as decarbonization progress, because it's the only way to involve prosumers, to involve industry, to bring more flexibility to compensate uncertainty of renewable production, basically. So this is what I think very shortly, the trends I would see in the power market and data management space.
Yeah, I think data management is something that's been going on for several years, but it's an unfinished activity, and I expect to see a lot more interest in data generally. I also think that the point you make about ecosystems is interesting, because not only do I see the vendors sort of creating ecosystems and promoting ecosystems as opposed to monolithic solutions, but to some extent the buyers are also seeming to get more focused on the things they do well and more willing to operationally outsource aspects of their business that they feel like are non-competitive. And so I think we'll see the emergence of more people with software as a service platforms offering the operational services on top in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It started with actually offering scheduling services, and this goes further to trading services, portfolio management as a service. You have VPP as a service company, so there is a lot of movement in this direction. And with a growing number of different type of market participants, you will see it more and more. People need to concentrate on things which brings most profit. And maybe one more comment on that. According to the Energy Transition Directive from European Commission's, PPA, so power purchase agreement, will become main instrument of marketing of renewable energy. And I would expect that this type of contracts will be more standardized in the future. There will be a market platform for trading this kind of deal. So the PPA on one hand will grow in the number very rapidly, but will be simpler and more standardized.
Good, thank you very much. Well, thank you for watching this first podcast, CTRM Radio, of the new year 2024. We'll be doing these about every 2 months in the future, in both video and audio format. And we appreciate your sharing, liking, and subscribing to the YouTube channel going forward. So I hope you found this podcast useful. Please do visit ctrmcenter.com. There you'll find lots of news, intelligence, and analysis and opinions about CTRM and related software, commodities trends in general, and everything that goes into driving the software market for CTRM, commodity management, and ERP for commodities software. Many thanks. This is Gary Vasey saying goodbye.
You've been listening to CTRM Radio, a podcast by leading industry analysts, Commodity Technology Advisory. You can find more information about us at comtechadvisory.com and much more news, views, research, and information on CTRM at the CTRM Center at CTRMcenter.com. Thank you for joining our presenters, managing partners Patrick Reams and Gary M. Vasey, and their guests today, and we hope to see you on a future edition of CTRM Radio.